Hey everybody, welcome back to the Personal Transformation Podcast. My name is Dan Storey, and today I'm joined by men's embodiment coach and facilitator, Jason Lange. Now, we're going to have a conversation about masculinity. Now, immediately, if you're a female listening to this, you're thinking, right, skip, next, let's get on to the next episode. If you're listening to this as the latest, then sorry, this is the latest episode, so you're stuck. But I want to make this hyper relevant for you, both for men and for women, because I saw a post this morning on Instagram, which was a man interviewing a woman, and he said to her, "Are you married?" And she said, "Yeah, like happily." And then the next question was really interesting, which was, "Is he happy?" And the woman says, "Oh, I thought you were going to ask me if I'm happy." It's like, "No, is he happy?" And it stopped her in her tracks. And I think there's a general disconnect between what men want, need, what masculinity is, what that noun means to so many people, and how that's viewed both by men and by women. And so Jason's here to help us break some of those myths, help expose some of the conversations around masculinity and what that really means to be a man these days. But this is going to be a topic for both men and women to dive into. So Jason, welcome to the show.
Yeah, so stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Masculinity is such a charged word, right? It's almost to the point where it's scary to be a man these days. We have to be apologetic for some of the elements that come in, and political correctness has gone absolutely crazy, where some of the things that we do naturally as men are now starting to be vilified. Now, I'm not saying that everything that men do is right. Far from it. This podcast is all about how we screw things up royally on a regular basis, not just men, but people in general. So I'm not trying to say that men are perfect, because we absolutely are not, but we need to figure out what masculinity is and what it's not. So that's kind of what I want us to talk about. And then ultimately some of the strategies that, me as a man, how can I step more into masculinity in a way that is socially acceptable, but also gives me everything that I need? So let's talk about that. Let's start off. What is masculinity?
Yeah, it's such a great question, right? We can go pretty deep on this. The first thing I'll say is there is so much baggage attached to these terms. So for those that feel that baggage, you don't even have to use the term masculine, right? So masculinity and femininity, as we often talk about them, they're just words and representations of primal energies in the universe that just so happen to manifest in these specific forms. So many of us have heard of yin and yang. There's masculine, feminine. Some teachers I know say alpha and omega. There's go and there's flow. There's feeling, there's perspective. And honestly, the most primal version of this polarity there is life and there is death. And so masculine and feminine actually kind of, in a lot of ways, are born out of that. So we all, no matter what kind of body we're in, no matter what we're identified with, we have both of these capacities within us. We have the capacity to witness our experience, and we have the capacity to be in our experience. That's really it, right? And as a man, I have a lot of feminine energy inside of us. We all do. Many women these days have a lot of masculine capacity inside of them. Now, part of what's happening in our world right now is it used to be, partly because of biology and necessity, if you were born in a woman's body, you were expected to act these certain ways. If you were born in a man's body, you were expected to act certain ways. And that served us, as humans for a time. But the big growth, right, of the last 100 years is we're starting to liberate from that. Meaning, just because you were born in a certain body does not mean you have to be associated primarily with a certain energy. That is a great thing in my mind. This is extremely good for everyone. On the traditional sides, right? Women, the feminine, are now allowed to come out into the world and have their own desires and goals and careers and things they want, where they're not totally reliant right, on a man to take care of them financially, physically, etc. That is awesome, because that actually frees women up from some pretty terrible situations. And on the flip side, what we've been discovering is, right, part of the work I do is, hey, as men, we're allowed to feel, to have interiors, to not always be executing and going, but we can restore and enjoy and be in our bodies. And this is great on both ends. It has created some challenges, right? Because now we're like, well, we used to have this paradigm of, well, men do this and women do that. And that worked and still works for certain people. But particularly those, I think, that get on the growth path, it starts to fall apart. And a lot of challenges I work with men are around dating and relationships, in terms of, wow, it used to be if I just did this, I could have a thriving relationship. It's not the case anymore. There's so much more being asked of us as men to bring to the table. And so paradoxically, as we now have more, everybody has more access to these different energies, we actually have to be more conscious about how we use them. And the term for this, right, there's this whole body of work called polarity work, which is, right, just working with the energy of how do these two energies interact. And when they're different, no matter who's playing which role, it tends to create an arc of attraction and closeness. When they're the same, at best, it creates neutrality. At worst, it actually creates repulsion. We actually push each other away. So being able to consciously wield these energies is big. And so for us men to learn, okay, well, what is this healthy masculine energy I can start to bring forward that is not the old macho jerk, my way or the highway? I take what I want. I don't care about the impact on others. And right, this is part of the reckoning we've been under for the last couple decades, that, yeah, there is a large and long history of men in particular being disconnected from their hearts and hurting people and the environment around them. That's changing, thankfully. But that's not all masculinity is. So, right, we don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater. And so a lot of guys I work with, right, they're like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the macho jerk. I don't want to be that dickhead. I don't want to be the one who takes advantage of women or people. So there was kind of a pendulum swing to what we would kind of call, and what I coach a lot of guys around, the nice guy. So I'm going to play it really safe. I'm actually super attuned to other people. Often I disconnect and sometimes even have shame about my sexuality, my desire, my anger. I have a hard time setting boundaries. I just want to be really friendly. And that guy is actually evolutionarily a huge leap forward. So this is something a lot of people get wrong. Like, that is an awesome place to be if you're a man, because you're not causing as much harm in the world. But those guys then hit a limit of, sometimes they feel taken advantage of. They're not getting what they want in life. They aren't creating thriving relationships. So the work these days is, okay, how do we integrate it all together to be a healthy, modern man that, quite simply, is connected to our bodies, our power, our desires, our sexuality, our ability to set boundaries and say no, but is also deeply attuned, open and sensitive in our hearts, connected to people around us, connected to the environment, and able to tune into what's the most important thing I could be focusing on in any given moment to create more depth, connection, love, trust in the world, in a sense. And we do not have a lot of modeling for that as men. There's very, very little modeling for what it means to be a powerful man that is still an emotional man, right? Most guys see one or the other. They see a guy who is just iron, but has no feeling, or who often collapses into feeling or even reactivity, right? Explodes into anger. The funny thing about that is not at all masculine, right? When we are just raging, that is not masculine. Masculine energy, in the way we're talking about, that anyone can cultivate, but us men in particular, it's very grounded. It's often quite still. It moves with intention. You can start to feel, and it tends to actually regulate the nervous systems of people around it. So, right, when we're really holding masculine presence, it tends to actually calm everyone down around us. It creates safety in a pretty significant way.
Yeah. Let me jump in. That was the one of the most comprehensive definitions and explanations of masculinity that I've heard in a long time. And I remember the first time I read the book "The Way of the Superior Man" by David Data. This was a while ago, and I've referred it to people. And if you put off by the title, get over it, because it's about polarity. It's whether you, like you said, masculine, feminine, alpha, omega, whatever you call it. Polarity is attraction, and the challenge that I see, and I think you're right, is historically we've been hyper masculine. Even people who haven't wanted to be masculine have been pushed into that because you have to be a man, blah blah blah. Now we've seen this entire pivot the other way, which is be in touch with your feelings and all those kind of things, and absolutely fine. And that in itself is creating tension and anxiety, because we now have this disconnect from who we are socially supposed to be. We feel that we're supposed to be, and like you say, there's no role models, not really, for this middle space. So I think it's going to be interesting to kind of talk about that a little bit at the moment. You talk about polarity. So polarity is really important. You have to have we'll go with masculine and feminine because it's just easier. But you have to have a masculine energy versus a feminine energy in a relationship for it to work. You have to, that polarity is required, but it doesn't have to be the same all the time. So let me give you a situation and let's see how you get on. So historically, I'm married. We're coming up to, how many years is it? Oh, going to be 8 years, something like that. Sorry. Nice. Should do my maths a little bit faster, but I'm on low carbs. Historically, I've been, the breadwinner. I've had the salary and kind of been in charge. And my wife went on maternity. We've got now a 4.5-year-old daughter who's amazing. And now we've switched roles, actually. She's now stepped back into her career, and I've taken a little bit of a backward step to do a little bit more at home. And now I'm trying to figure out what my role is. And actually, with that element of my personality taken away, I feel that has challenged my energy levels. Whether you call it masculinity or not, there's definitely an energy shift in me. And you mentioned things like being angry and disconnected and things. I feel that. Like, I can completely feel that. My question to you is, given that there's this scenario, and I don't want to become hyper masculine. I don't need to step in and be chest beating. I do the bodybuilding and things. That's not as a masculine thing. That's as a personal venting thing. But how do we create polarity? How do we create polarity in a world where, like you say, women in a heterosexual relationship, and apply it to whatever your setup is, but women are being pushed into masculine without me going into feminine and kind of conceding and being the nice guy completely? How do we maintain a polarity in a relationship where there's kind of both sides are being pushed to kind of go and accomplish things?
Absolutely. And like you said, real key here, it flexes and flows. And so part of the new capacity we're having to build as conscious people in relationship is actually the ability to flow back and forth depending on what's needed. And the truth is, a lot of modern relationship, particularly right when you have a family and you're raising a kid and you have jobs, is not polarized. Probably 80 to 90% of our days, we're just managing life together with our partners. Okay, I've got to do this. You're going to do this. I'm going to do this. Right. The key to this work, to the idea of polarity, is when we do want to reestablish an energetic and erotic connection, how do we do that? So maybe my wife's been out. My wife is an incredible masculine, runs a very successful business. She's been out working all day. Yeah, maybe I've been with my daughter. Okay, but now we have time for us. How are we going to reestablish that, right? That's where we actually have to practice these capacities in our body to shift the energy. So quite simply for the masculine, right, what we might do is, okay, yeah, my wife and I, we got 2 hours tonight, maybe after the kid goes to bed. I might actually do 15 or 20 minutes of meditative practice to really still and slow down my mind, my body, get out of my head, start to ground, become really present. The simplest version of polarity practice would then be my wife and I get in front of each other and I ground. We make deep eye contact. I start breathing more deeply than her. I feel her. I feel the space around us. I feel my depth. And I just become radically present to her in the moment with no objective or outcome. That will start to polarize a partner. Just that, nothing else, to become radically present, to hold the space, right, as we would say in the masculine sense. And then if we want to accentuate that, and this is obviously with our partner's permission and consent, this is the bedrock of this type of thing, we would then start to bring in more directive energy as the masculine. I'm going to draw you a bath. You're going to take a bath for the next 30 minutes. We're going to reconnect after that, right? You start to actually direct your partner, and she gets to just experience and express, ooh, that sounds great, or no, I don't want to do that, right? And then we're adjusting as we go. Another way to put these are, it's so clear, right? Again, whatever you want to call the labels, just look at partner dance. There's the lead and there's the follow. One is not better than the other if you've ever tried them. They're both actually quite hard and take a lot of vulnerability to, okay, I'm going to direct the dance. And I'm going to give up control even if this person is leading me poorly, right? This is part of the generosity both sides have to bring. And, there's countless practices you can do, right? And the truth is, with polarity, you can learn most of it in a weekend workshop, like some of these tools and hacks and techniques. The practice of it is the challenge, making the time for it, and then making sure you've actually have enough cleared emotional space between the two of you so that when you do have time, it's not full of resentments or exhaustion or fatigue or stuff you're mad at your partner about, that you're actually dealing with that stuff as you go. And then you can show up into these spaces and bring forward the, again, for a lot of women these days, they have an incredible capacity for agency, masculinity, holding, driving. And yet they don't want to do it all the time. So it actually can be a great gift to come back home. And we say, you know what, baby, I got it. Here's the plan. Boom. Here's how I can guide her more into relaxation, into her heart. And that can be a great relief for the feminine. Again, a lot of traditional arrangements too around family, right? Paradoxically, taking care of kids often has a lot of masculine energy, schedules and making food, and you're doing this. And so when we're able to step in and take on some of that as men, that's also deeply nourishing to our partners. And then, there's going to be times where we want it flipped, where we're like, man, I just want to be taken care of tonight. Can you just make the plan? And that can be so nourishing for us men. But again, all that really matters is a little bit of consciousness of who's holding what role right now.
Yeah.
And what would most serve my partner in doing it. So
here's an interesting one. And we mentioned the name Andrew Tate before this. And my nephew has, I remember about 6 months ago, he was talking to me, there's this guy, Andrew Tate, and he's like a man expert. And, he's telling all men to do these things. And there's definitely like a toxic space there. And you said, like, is there's a void, there's a need for more masculinity in a way that we're talking about right now, but isn't being made available. And so there's this void of just being toxic masculine and going over to top masculine. What you're saying is there's a reliance on the female. Again, I'm just going heterosexual relationship. There's a reliance on the female to make space for that. There's a reliance on an understanding for that to happen. And yet many women don't do that. We kind of go back to the point earlier. It's like, is your husband happy? It's like, I don't know. To actually face up to that. So is it possible for men to be masculine without their partner, wife, whatever, also playing a part in it? Or is this something we can do on our own that is a bit more healthier than, say, the toxic masculine groups?
Yeah, that would be kind of what I pointed to of, there's things you can do independently of your partner. So grounding and regulating your nervous system would be probably element number one. So that means, what are you actually feeling inside of you? One thing a lot of men get wrong is the purest version of the masculine we're talking about here. It is actually quite relaxed. It is not a braced, pushing energy, right? That real masculine energy is just here.
I'm thinking Mufasa in
yeah.
Basically,
there you go.
My daughter's in Lion King. We watched it the other day, but I've got it if I need it. I'm not going to use it all the time.
Yes.
But if you try and mess with me, I'm gonna mess you up.
Yeah. Totally. But point being, a lot of men are actually walking around with an incredible amount of tension in their bodies, in their hearts, and have an almost nonstop ruminating mind. Just thinking. Thoughts, right? Because they're constantly changing, lo and behold, thoughts are also more associated with the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So if our attention is on our inner thought process, guess what? We're not showing up as the masculine in the moment.
But we also, this is the other thing, we're told to talk about our thoughts and feelings. Like, we need to be expressive. Like you said, you mentioned this idea of the lone wolf, because this is the challenge is, okay, now I have my thoughts and feelings. I've tried talking to my wife once, maybe twice about it. Never goes well, because it's always, but it that's because the lack of polarity. That's because the polarity just disappears immediately. So how do I balance this? I need to talk to someone. I don't want to just be a lone wolf and go and deal with this, because I know it takes me into a very, very dark place with, like you said, getting the clarity and changing my frequencies, I guess.
Yeah, this is great. There's kind of two parts here. One would be, part of the deepest work we can do as men is developing our capacity for interoception. So becoming aware of what's happening inside of us and being able to describe it. A lot of us men don't know how to do that. So when we try to get a feeling out, it's kind of weird and awkward and squishy, and we're not sure. And we actually have to do work to get clear about that, because we are not taught that as men from a very young age. This is where, whatever you believe of the word, there is a patriarchy, and it actually hurts men as much as anything else. From a very young age, stop crying, be tough, get up, sit still, right? All these messages young boys get from a young age, that whatever's happening inside of you, override it with your head, right? Work harder, 80-hour weeks, doesn't matter what your body's feeling. Play football, it's just go, go, go. And so we don't have a lot of capacity for, hey, what's happening inside of me? So for one, it's increasing our capacity for that, which makes it easier to communicate it more clearly. And number two, right, a huge part of what I do and why I am so strong on men needing strong men's community is, when you're not sure, you actually go to your men to help you get clear about what you're feeling, what you need, what you're wanting, so that you can then bring the clear version of that back to your partner. So again, to be able to polarize, it does not mean we don't have feelings or fears or vulnerabilities. Actually, that is a human thing, which is way more primal than masculine or feminine. But we can start to bring the polarized version of that, where a lot of female partners get freaked out, is because most men these days lone wolf it, keep it all inside. They don't have anyone to talk to about it. One of the only places sometimes they kind of feel okay sharing it is with their intimate partner. But then they finally bring it forth, and there's this like, right? It's just like the emotional kind of vomit. And then our feminine partners are like, whoa, I don't know what to do with that. Like, do you need me to fix it? Do you want me to hold you? Do you want me to mother you? It can be very confusing, right? When a man is part of a men's group or has solid men around him who he's able to bring some of that uncertainty and messiness to, they can hold that. And my wife could speak to this, right? If I bring something towards her and she can feel my men are holding me, she is relieved from having to fix it. She might be inspired to help me, but there's not this, oh my God, right now, if I don't help you, you don't know what to do. And that's hard for me to trust. So a men's group, in some sense, it's great for polarity because we get to bring our emotional, messy, feminine feeling side to other men who have no problem holding that, in my experience. And then from that, we get clear and get to bring that back to our partnerships. And something you can try, next time maybe you have an interaction like that takes a little work for us men, is can you express what you're feeling, hurting, wanting, needing, whatever, in 2 sentences or less? Because what it brings is depth. So there was a time when I first transitioned to being a men's coach like 7 years ago. My wife had started coaching before me. Polarity totally flipped. She was crushing it financially. I was not having that success yet. She wanted to have a kid. I was deeply in debt. It was not going well. When I get stressed, lo and behold, like a lot of men, what do? I withdraw. Wasn't sharing what was going on with her. Wasn't really talking about the plan. And it was freaking her out. And so one day, she kind of like had a freak out. I was like, what's going on? What's the plan? Da, da, da. Thankfully, I'd done enough work. And though I hadn't been proactive, I caught it in the moment, kind of stilled myself, really felt into what was going on. And I just turned to her and I said, right now, it just feels like I'm losing everywhere. And I want to be winning. And it really hurts. And I'm working on it with my guys to make a plan. And that was it. Her whole nervous system went. She totally relaxed because she felt where I was at. I was very clear about what I was at. And it wasn't an, oh my God, I need you to help me fix it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what to do. It was,
It's
I don't
under
know what to do
control.
right now.
I've got a
And I'm
plan.
figuring it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. My plan is to figure this out. So the bottom lining thing can be a great way to share our vulnerability in a polarized way. Again, it doesn't always have to be that way, but it can bring a lot, right? And again, masculine energy in a lot of ways. Another way to think about this is it's, like I said, at the deepest form, it's that which witnesses, it's emptiness, it's death. So it's less. So if we want to polarize a moment, we move less. We use less words. We go more slowly. So when we can bottom line our internal experience, it can come across in a very different way. And I work with guys a lot on this in men's groups and programs, trying to get them to learn to just get to the root of it.
Yep.
I'm feeling sad, angry, and bored.
Yeah.
And like that leap to get a man there can be huge.
It is this idea that we are the rock. That's effectively what you're saying there. And this is what, we as men need to come to, is that stability, like you say, stillness, strength, all of those things comes from a grounding of our energy, not a franticness. Franticness just kind of dissipates all that energy, and we do stupid things. I know we do stupid things because I've done many of those stupid things. Luckily, not as much anymore. Probably still guilty of some of them, but definitely the franticness is the challenge. And what I liked about the way you stated it there, when you're having that challenge, is here's what I'm feeling. I'm not scared of explaining what I'm feeling, and I don't need you to solve it, because part two was, and I'm working through it with my guys, is that, you know, the polarity remains. It's like, look, here's an insight into what's going on, but now go back over there because I'm still over here doing stuff. So I like that, because a lot of people would just put that first part, right? Oh, I'm scared, I'm this, I'm tired, I'm this, and everything's going terrible and everything's going wrong. And you just look the opposite of a rock, right? That takes away that rockness. One of the questions I was going to ask you, but I think you've made it abundantly clear, is what's the difference between a man's group and meeting your mates down at the pub? So I have two friends. We have a WhatsApp group that if that ever got leaked, you know, it's the standard thing that, you know, where everything is going to go to hell. But when we meet, we talk about the challenges and things that we're facing, be that relationship, career, you know, fitness. We talk a lot about all sorts of topics. It's not just purely about relationship. But it's often a case of, yeah, I'm going through that too. Okay, let's all carry on. We're just we'll meet same time next month. Yeah, okay, cool. There's no solution to it. It doesn't help you boil down the issue, get to be more powerful with the way you communicate it or think about a solution. How do you, so when you think about let's say, you know, my wife comes home later from work, she's working late, she has an event. I'm going to look after my daughter in the afternoon. And I say to her, I say, hey, I'm going to go and join a men's group. What is the normal reaction to that? And is there a way that we can explain that or express that in a way that makes it inclusive and not, I need space from you?
Yeah, I think it's what I tell my guys is every investment you make into other deep, trustable, connected men is an investment into your relationship and your family. Seen it time and time again. You know, I can just share from one example, like in men's groups. You know, I've been married like 7 years now, and I've multiple times had the experience of I come into my group all charged up about something in my relationship, bring it forward. You know, the guys give me some questions and guide me towards some things. And then almost inevitably, sometimes in the process, yeah, it sounds like it's a little bit more about you than her, right? You didn't actually state what you wanted or needed or whatever. And often I'll see it. And paradoxically, instead of going home and having a fight, I go home and more deeply connect with my partner because I was able to get clarity about something ahead of time. But the most important thing is that, yeah, for a lot of people, right, they associate men hanging out together with, you know, traditional kind of bro locker energy. And there's, you know, it's totally a time and place to do some of this stuff, in that most men are taught to relate via triangulation. So me and you connect with each other by having our attention on a third thing. Sporting venue, music, talking about things, fixing cars, right? You and I connect by both having our attention on this third thing. A men's group essentially is we're going to turn towards each other. So when we're together, our attention is actually on each other. What's happening inside of you? What's hard right now? What hurts? What are you wanting to move towards and be held accountable for? And how can we support you in doing that? Right? So it's actually about becoming more present in our lives. A good men's group, good men around us, will guide us deeper into our direct felt body experience in the moment. So we're much more clear about what we want, what we're feeling, what we're needing, so we can bring that back to our families. And, you know, I both lead retreats and go on retreats a couple times a year. And it's a, you know, big sacrifice when I leave my family for 4 or 5 days sometimes. And I can tell you why that still works and my wife is willing to support me in that, is when I come back, I'm more present in the family. I have more capacity to give our daughter. I'm more open. I'm more vulnerable. I'm more grounded, right? So there's a payoff here in a sense. And for a lot of us guys, it's where we get to go to recharge. So the masculine part of all of us, again, whoever it is, where we restore. So how the masculine part of anyone restores is being in a space of no demand. There is no demand on our attention, on our presence, and men can very easily give that to each other. When we sit in circle, we're just here to be with each other exactly as we're at, paradoxically, of like, yeah, wow, that sounds really hard. Sometimes just that, just having somewhere to put this stuff starts to restore us. And then we get to come back more polarized because our nervous system, again, is more grounded and relaxed. And for most partners of men I work with, they end up being stoked when their man gets into a group because it shifts the energy pretty fast, actually, pretty fast.
Okay, we'll come back to how do we find men's groups that are, like you say, non-toxic versions in just a few moments. But I got a question. So you talked there about boundaries. We talked a lot about communication. I'm assuming that when you find a few of these things, there are certain topics that come up on a regular occurrence that people just, habitually repeat either individually or, there's a trend across many men. What are some of those that you see coming up regularly? How do we communicate them badly, and what are some of the tips that you've kind of shared with people, other than kind of grounding first, to help establish, especially around the boundaries?
Like what kind of boundary issues do I see a lot of men having? Yeah. I mean, it's pretty all encompassing. I would say most men I know are not taught to do two things: not taught how to set boundaries and not taught how to deal with conflict and repair in relationships. So a lot of people never had it modeled in their family system for, what happens when we have a fight? How do we fight well? And how do we come back to connection and repair? And boundaries are actually pretty deeply woven into that. And it's an incredible capacity to learn how to clearly set boundaries, but it often starts, right, with being aware of what's happening inside of our bodies. So for a lot of men, it's even just learning the signs for, I think I need to set a boundary or renegotiate a commitment in my life of some kind, because this thing keeps happening. And when it happens, I do not feel good in my body. I feel resentful or angry or used or whatever that might be, or just exhausted and fatigued, right? Because I'm not having a chance to restore myself. So this is where I love men's groups, because these issues will start to boil up. Other guys can help us often see it. And then what's really great about a men's group is it's where we get to actually practice getting clear and speaking the boundary. And so what I've found is, hand in hand with boundaries, one of the best ways to set them in an inviting way is to bring them forward without the emotional charge. So, I'm so pissed at her, she always does this. If I go to set that boundary and I'm charged up and reactive, not going to go so well. So coming to our men, we first get to move the charge. So just, okay, you got 90 seconds, just go on a rant. What's fucked up about the situation? What's not fair? Just whine, in a sense, like give yourself, your nervous system, full permission to do that. You give a guy a few minutes of like really go for it. Body calms down, charge moves.
Yep.
And then you get to actually workshop with the men how to bring that forward. So what's the 200% version? Whoa, that's a little too strong. Oop, that one's a little too soft. Boom, right there. Right there, you said it. And you actually get to practice getting the words through your mouth right? So there's a little bodily muscle memory so that when we go into that space, we've done it before. And this is one of the, honestly, killer features I've seen of groups. And suddenly guys start to have a process by which they can start to identify and then express them, whether it's setting limits on certain things in their lives, or honestly, even the other kind of boundary of, hey, I need some time. I've had guys who, doing some work with me, just this summer, a guy asked for time off for the first time in 25 years from his work. He was like, I want to go home overseas for 4 weeks. And lo and behold, once he asked, they were like, yeah, but he'd had no capacity before for how to do that. He assumed couldn't do that. So learning to set clear and healthy boundaries are really key. And, a big part of how I've learned to do that I really like is it's not about controlling the other person, right? We know we're setting a healthy boundary when we're telling the other person what we will do. And then we have to follow through on that.
Mm. So I can see, I can just imagine in some of the conversations I've had, there's, like you say, time away, an individual time. My wife has time with the girls, but I often feel guilty about saying, I'm going to go and do this because I should be looking after the kid or something like the kid. She has a name. I'm not going to use it. There's things around that, work commitments, for things when I have to go away for work, there's tension, things along those lines, intimacy, expectations and things along those lines. What are some of the common ones that you find coming up a lot, and how, give us an example of some of the ways that those very common ones could be phrased differently and brought to the table without that energy and that kind of, like you said, the 200% version.
Yeah, it's often, it's about what I need to be more present, I think is often, what it really comes down to. In that, for a lot of partners, what I've found is they only get resentful of us going away, let's say, or when we're not present, when we're actually with them. And so this is a big thing for men that oftentimes it's kind of a boundary in a sense. If we're overwhelmed or burdened by work, or man, we're just burnt out and we just need to zone out, rather than bringing that forward and being very clear about where we're at, we'll half-ass it. We'll kind of be in the room, but maybe be on our phone, maybe be thinking about work. And that is the most painful thing often to our intimate partners. So one thing we can start to do is start to be very direct. Hey, I don't have anything in my tank right now. I actually can't be present for you right now. I need to go do my thing for 20 minutes, and then I want to come back and really actually be with you. Now, the key with that is you actually got to come back in 20 minutes, and then you really got to be present in a sense. But most people over time would much rather have you be honest about what you're actually available for than half-ass it and not really be there, right? So sometimes that's to admit, I'm having a very hard time being present for you right now in the way I want to be. Here's how I'm realizing I need to take care of myself right now so that I can come back and really be with you, or really be with our kid, or really be with the family, whatever that might be. So that's a big capacity, and that often involves us getting really skilled in managing transitions. Another huge difficulty I find for the masculine. Right?
One transition I can imagine comes up quite a lot, and we should extend the length of these podcasts to at least 3 days or something along those lines. But is this, you talked about it, is as when things go wrong, is men tend to retract and we go out and we do something else. We're like, we're not going to deal with this tension. I haven't got time for this. I'm going to go and do something else and it'll resolve itself. How, other than kind of getting clear, how do men make that shift inside to try and re-engage? And at what point does it become like, oh, I'm too disengaged, if there's ever a point? But it's like we've kind of got to that point where I know I need to lean back into the relationship, but I just don't need to, I don't feel it. Like, what's the advice you give to people at that point?
Yeah, I would reestablish some connection with your partner first. Now, there could be a couple ways to do that. Sometimes we might not be wanting to engage because we're angry, we're resentful, and you need to move that. You need to move that energy. You can't just pretend like it's not in there. You don't have to move it with your partner. It's key. Again, another important thing about a men's group. So you might just need to move some of that energy to then be able to come back. Again, some of the actual presence practices can be huge here of, yeah, I notice I'm having a hard time leaning into our relationship right now. So one, you share it. Here's what I'm noticing. I care about you and I'd prefer that to be different, right? And then, practice, the simplest practice for this kind of resonance in relationship a lot of times, whether it's in conflict or you've been apart, is just silent eye contact. Is actually just getting close to our partner and reestablishing without words, just and it's often very confronting for both of us. I think the other thing for us men is, it's learning to prioritize the connection over being right. A big shift I have to work often in myself and with men is to be less of a lawyer and be more of a lover, right? So a lot of men, we have this thing, the fix her energy rather than the feel her energy of, well, if I just explained to her the situation, she would understand that I didn't mean to do that and hurt her. And then she wouldn't feel the way she's feeling. And then I would be relieved of that tension, right? And man, you want to piss a feminine partner off, coming with that energy, it's going to get pretty heated pretty fast.
We're told never to apologize. Is the problem, Jason?
Well, you got to think of it this way. The analogy I've been using for guys is, if we're outside playing and I accidentally smack you in the head with a baseball bat and I say, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do, it wasn't intentional. And it wasn't intentional. It still hurts.
Yeah.
Right? You are still in pain. And you probably want me to acknowledge that pain. Like, oh man, that totally wasn't intentional. I'm so sorry. That looks like it's really painful. I believe you that's really painful right now, right? Sometimes just that. And so it's not about, falling into the trap of, I have to please and appease her all the time. But you do have to acknowledge her emotional state, which means first you have to resonate with it and actually just be present in it. Truth be told is a lot of times, if we do that as men, our partners don't even need anything from us. They don't need us to fix it, or they're just like, I just want to know you fucking can feel what I'm feeling, right? And the second they feel us in that space, then something else becomes possible in that sense. And, there's just an awareness of taking responsibility for ourselves as men. When we drop consciousness or awareness, we should get feedback around that. The trick is we don't have to take it personally. It is going to happen no matter what. You're going to drop the ball as a man. It's going to happen. And for a lot of guys, they get that feedback though, and they collapse. Oh, she doesn't love me. She's not good enough. Da, da, da. It's just, oh yeah, I did drop the ball on that. Right? Thank you for making me aware of that. Sometimes even if we can just take that feedback in, it can be really transformative. So I don't know if I really answered your question there, but
I always say this on podcasts. The answer was correct. Just adjust the question to the answer that you've given. So it was perfect. Perfect answer. This is, and I'm, hopefully you're recognizing that I'm trying to smile and be a professional host for a podcast, but also at the same time, I'm nodding like got a crazy bobblehead. The realizations that you've been kind of drawing upon from me. So personally, thank you so much for shining light on things that I've known about but forgotten, which has been super useful. Let's talk about next steps. Let's talk about, as a man, what can I do? How do I find a group that can support me, sustain me, reconnect me with that masculine energy and energy? What's the best way to go about getting started?
Yeah, the good news is, the tidal wave is cresting in terms of men's work really hitting the culture now because it's needed. Men have not had the tools we've needed to thrive in this complex world. And, when I started this work 20 years ago, you said the word men's group, maybe a church group, Bible study group, or maybe a recovery group were kind of the two types of groups out there. And those, for the right man, that can be great. But there's this whole new subset of men's work and men's groups that we're talking about here that are really about cultivating deeper presence, getting more embodied, learning these relational skills and capacities that are based on not just talking about things out there, but getting real about what's happening in our lives. And so they're everywhere now once you learn what to start to look for. And, men's groups, it's kind of this vague term as meditation, like say, like I meditate. It's like, well, what of the thousands of styles are you talking about? There's a lot of different styles of men's groups that can be more social, more support group, more accountability, more embodiment practice. A great group's going to have a little bit of a blend of all of them. And these days, you can Google online, men's groups near me, Eventbrite, Meetup. It's starting to percolate in some pretty profound ways. There's lots of online communities for joining things for guys that don't actually have geographical resources near them. So I work with a lot of guys more out in rural areas that are like, what are you talking about? No, there's nothing. But technology like this makes that quite available now. Some of the biggest, probably the biggest physical presence around the globe is the Mankind Project. They've been having some growing pains recently, but they pretty much have a chapter in every major city. So that's something where if you actually want to go sit in the room with men, that's a way to do it. Then there's lots of virtual ones. There's lots of weekends and workshops. And then the thing I'm pretty passionate about is if you can't find one, it's probably time for you to start it. And so if you're looking and you can't find one in your community, that almost certainly means there are other men who are also looking for one. And it doesn't have to be a big fancy thing at first. You were sharing a little bit, and one of my second group when I was in Los Angeles, it was me and two guys. We just decided we want to do this. Here's the date and time we're going to meet. Here's a little bit of structure and agreements. And then we started inviting men into that over time, and the right ones stayed and the wrong ones didn't. And that group still going today. I don't live there anymore, but still in touch with them all the time. And, if nothing else, you can just grab a buddy, say, hey, you want to get together for 90 minutes on Friday and just get real about what's going on in life. Where are you at? Where do you want to be? What's in the way? What skills or capacities do you need to develop in yourself in order to be able to move towards that? And, the wild thing is I have found, like, once men are given the space, turns out we have a shit ton to say. It's like, oh my God, finally somewhere I can share everything that's going on instead of holding it inside. And, I'll just start to wrap up in a sense with, and, it's not just like, this sounds really fun and good. This will impact your life, right? There are lots of statistics for what happens when we remain isolated as men in particular. We die earlier, our health outcomes go way down. Like isolation is as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day or being morbidly obese, particularly on like heart disease and stuff. I can't remember the name of the book right now, but they did the one study that's literally being part of a group that meets regularly, not even a men's group, but a group that meets regularly, decreases your chances of dying in the next year by like 50%, just being part of something. And this stuff, I think you and I are probably around the same age. It'll catch up to you. Most men I work with, it's like we kind of come with a preloaded credit card, and we're just hitting it, going out, partying, working 80 hours a week. Just I can go. You start to hit your late 30s and 40s, the limits of that start to become very apparent. And if we don't really start tending our bodies and our inner emotional world, it will show up in autoimmune disorders, all kinds of sickness. And that's why I encourage men, the sooner you can start building these connections, the better, because most guys don't want to hear it, but I don't care how tough, how strong, how fit you are. There will be a day where your body fails you.
Yeah.
where there's something you want to do and you cannot do it. And if you have not built the trusted network of people where you're like, I got 25 guys on my bat dial any time of day, any place, like they got me and they've had me in some, pretty intense moments in my life. You want to start building that now. A man in community is more resilient. So that's the other thing I'll just share, right? You are more resilient. You can get more done, paradoxically, when you're not holding it inside, when you have other brothers at your back.
I love that. Jason, this has been, I can't think of a really good word, which probably means I need to do some introspection in terms of feelings. But this has been a great insight. And like I said at the beginning, men, if you've been listening to this, then take heart that you're not on your own. And this is something that we all need to face and all need to learn how to explain, communicate, feel through. But we don't need to do it on our own. We absolutely don't need to do it on our own. I think, Jason, what you just highlighted there is so important. And women, if you've been listening, this is what goes on in our head the whole time. Like, we're sitting there next to you and you think that we're disconnected. We're not. We're trying to figure this out and trying to do it in a way that isn't going to annoy you, piss you off even more, create even more distance, all of those things. And help us by pushing us out the door and trying to find these groups of men, because we are better. And I say we, men individually, but also relationships are better when we've got this polarity. It brings us together in a way because we are different and we can enjoy those differences. So, Jason, thanks for taking us on a tour. Very quickly, how can people connect with you? I know you're pretty active on Instagram. We've seen some amazing stuff, but how do people connect with you?
Yeah, best way to keep up with me is to go to my website, evolutionary.men. So not .com, but .men. And you can see my podcast on there. You can get links to all my socials, different programs I do. And if you're like feeling the call and you need help finding a men's group, I'm very open to that. So just hit the contact form. You don't have to work with me. I will, if you're like, I'm in this area, I'm looking for something. I love just getting guys into groups if you need some pointers or directions.
Amazing. I'll put all the links at the bottom of the show notes, but thank you for listening. Jason, thanks again for joining us. And let's bring back a little polarity today. I think that's the final message.
Yeah. Love it.